Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, I got to watch the Ohio State Northwestern game. Again. It was drier this time, so that was good.
What was no different for me? You know, I handled the conditions the same way both times. I went in knowing what to expect, and I got what I expected. I went in there the first time, and I thought I was ready, and I toughened it out, and I made it through. And then this time, I knew exactly what to expect. Both times, Tom, I will say I watched the game with a poncho on, so that helped.
Yes, you watched both games indoors too, which definitely helped as well. Hopefully the snacks were just as good the second time.
They were not. Northwestern does pretty well. They had some Chicago sausage. They had some Italian beef. And there were some other things there and some giant cookies. So, no, I was much better off in Evanston watching the game than here, watching the game via YouTube at like 9 and 9:30 in the morning as I'm trying to hurry up and watch it so that I can get to campus and all that. And no, Tom, it was much better in Evanston. Although this was a nice, again, hey, welcome to our rewatch of the previous games, Ohio State Northwestern. What we learned. So it was interesting to watch this and see how this crazy thing was broadcast and displayed to the country. So I thought everybody got a pretty good look, but I don't even know if this is one of your five things, but how accurate would you say the picture was in terms of how it was? Because I don't think you can really display entirely what it was like there.
Well, there's just a certain point where stuff blowing around just looks like stuff blowing around. And it's like, wow, the tree, there was a shot of a tree behind one of the end zones, and you can see it kind of blowing back and forth. It's like, yeah, the tree's blowing, so there's wind. And you could see, garbage bags or, pieces of garbage flying across the field. And it was like, yeah, there's wind there. But I don't know that communicates materially the difference between a 20 mile an hour wind or a 50 mile an hour wind. And it was just, and you would see all the cameras on the left side of the field, the north side of the field, anytime they cut to them, they were just covered in rain. So that communicated, I think, how wet it was on the field. But the wind, it didn't quite, they were trying and they were talking about it a bunch, but it didn't quite communicate it to the degree that it was a factor on the field.
Well, let me go first then, because that goes right into something of mine, and it was like the first thing you notice or the first thing that you see when Ohio State gets the ball is, and I saw this from the press box, the wind is just horizontal and it's right in Ohio State's faces, and the camera is right on CJ Stroud's face, and he's just getting blasted with rain. He's squinting the entire time of that first drive. Like, just you get a pretty good visual of what he's dealing with or what's hitting him in the face, and that he's not the only one. Obviously, it's the entire offense that is dealing with that. And then later on in the game, you see him express confusion with like where the ball is going in terms of, when I throw it, I don't know what's going to happen to it. It goes this way, it goes that way. And there's some frustration there. Then he's on the bench later on trying to explain it to people. And at one point he was throwing grass up in the air to get an idea. And he mentioned post game, like, I don't have time to throw grass up in the air every time, but he did that one time just to try to get an idea of what is going to happen when I take the snap and throw the ball. And I thought the camera work several times really showed how it was affecting him. And I thought that conveyed it a little bit if people were open to seeing it and hearing about it. And I know we're harping on it, and Ryan Day said on Tuesday, you keep talking about it, and it sounds like you're making excuses, just talking about stuff that we saw here.
Yeah, and there were certain camera angles where you could see throws to receivers that the ball just got pushed backwards or got pushed sideways or got pushed in front of a receiver or behind a receiver. There was one, I think it might have been the first drive of the game, where he was throwing to G. Scott, and G. Scott had a couple steps on the defender, and Stroud threw it, and it just like ran into a wall, and he's throwing it in front of G. Scott, and G. Scott keeps running, and the ball just kind of stops before it gets there, and that allowed the defender to catch up and knock it away. That was just kind of a little microcosm of the day. And you really had to kind of be looking for it to see it. But once you saw it, it was kind of like you could just see it over and over and over again. Everything was a step too far, a step behind, just instead of the throw being on time, it was like a quarterback who can't make his decision and throws just, 1 second too late, and then the window's not there anymore. It was just that all day for both teams, really. And, you could sort of limit it if you kept, did real short throws, but anything thrown more than 15 yards downfield that got completed was essentially a miracle.
Not to hog all of them, but you're talking about my second one, and I'll go again, and then I'll let you go twice, Tom. Just calm down. Basically, the wind blew, and just so people know, when you're watching the game, the wind was blowing from the right side of the TV to the left side, but also blowing towards the camera. So it's coming in at a diagonal. All of the incompletions, save for the drops and a couple of the passes broken up, were blown away, like towards the camera. And that's the wind was impacting all of that. The deep shot to Julian Fleming, going from right to left, and it's like over his head, and like everything was blown in that G. Scott one you mentioned. It's like it was all blown a little bit to the camera, and that either helped the defense or it was completely uncatchable. The throw to Emeka Egbuka with double coverage where like it wasn't near anybody. The wind was just blowing everything towards the camera, and that was the bulk of the incompletions that weren't drops. And even some of the drops got blown that way too.
Yeah, that was one where there were a bunch of drops, and drops from guys who normally don't drop the football. I mean, Emeka Egbuka had a drop that would have been just a walk-in touchdown, and there was a defender there who got his hand up, and you couldn't quite tell on TV whether he tipped the ball or not, but, the wind is blowing it, and it's going all over the place, and it's kind of, you never want to have drops, and I'm sure Brian Hartline is not thrilled about the drops, but yeah, it's like an excused absence. Like, yeah, I get it. Like you have a doctor's note, there was a lot of wind, signed Epstein's mother. Like it was just, yeah, what am I supposed to do? The ball's going it's like trying to hit a knuckleball, except you're trying to catch it. And you have not caught knuckleballs before. I don't think there is a knuckleball setting on the jugs machine that we see them using at practice. So it is, you can only do so much, and that was, Ryan Day talked about the fact that it was one of those, no such thing as an ugly win. Like you just gotta win and move on, and that was a win and move on game, and that was one of the big reasons why. As hard as it was to throw the football, while stepping into it and all that, can we have a round of applause for Mason Arnold and frankly Northwestern's long snapper too? That I have not seen champions this week. I don't know if they have announced champions for this week, but if Mason Arnold isn't a champion for the week, they need to stop doing it, because he snapped in those completely ludicrous conditions where C.J. Stroud, stepping into throws, could not throw it, accurate, super accurately because of how bad the wind was. And Mason Arnold was like, sometimes the ball was maybe a foot to the left or a foot to the right or whatever, but it was just, there was nothing where Jesse Mirko had to jump up high. There was, the PATs, the snaps were all right there. That was, Ryan Day talked about not wanting to go into shotgun as much, doing more stuff under center because of how the wind would impact the snap to shotgun. The snap to the punter's like twice as long as the snap to shotgun, and they were all just great. And he's, Mason Arnold is someone who is playing because of the injury to Bradley Robinson, and he's kind of been thrust into the spotlight a little bit. And that was a real, rude welcome to major college football. Don't screw anything up. It's a pretty close game, and one bad snap on a punt could swing the game. And it was really good every time. That was very, very impressive to me.
Yeah, if I'm Mason Arnold, I am yelling at the offense, like, get some first downs. Like you're giving me too much work here. You're putting me in a bad situation. I shouldn't even be here today. That sort of thing. And he did well, and he got the ball where it needs to be. And some of those punts, they like to, some of the snaps, they'll like to. Bradley Robinson would angle it a little bit, and Jesse Mirko kind of catches it on the run. I think this is just like, just get it back to me, and we'll figure it out from there. That's step one.
Yeah, for sure. And there were, this was not, a normal game where it's like, well, you have to execute one good punt snap and then the game is over. This was, our buddy Marcus Hartman tweeted in the middle of the game that Jesse Mirko had, like 20% of his season punts had come in the first 2 quarters or 2.5 quarters of the game or whatever it was. And honestly, that number felt low. It was it was like, are you sure it's not like a third? You sure it's only a fifth? It felt like a lot of punts. And, that many good snaps in those kind of conditions and inconsistent conditions. It was not just a wind tunnel where the wind is constantly blowing at exactly 56.5 miles an hour. Sometimes it's 20. Sometimes it's 28. Sometimes it's 45. And it was just, again, and he probably didn't have time to throw grass in the air either. That was one of those that was a perfect long snapper thing where you didn't really notice him at all during the course of the game. I don't think they talked about him very much on TV. But if he had had one bad one, everyone in the state of Ohio would know his name, and not for a good reason. So that is the long snapping job in a nutshell. You do your job even in impossible conditions, and everyone just kind of goes, Mason, who? What? Who?
Yeah, and your next one, Tom, since I went twice.
All right. Well, I'm going to go. With there was a lot of trouble for Ohio State in short yardage. And a lot of it, there were a couple of them that failed in the same way, which was having Cade Stover trying to block number 99 for Northwestern, Adebawore. Cade Stover giving up 25 pounds to him, and it was just like they were slanting away. The line the line was slanting left, and so it was like, okay, the tight end has to pick up the oversized defensive end. And that was not a winning combination for Ohio State. There were a couple of those, and that's putting Cade Stover in a tough spot. And then there was another one where it looked like they left Adebawore unblocked, and he got in real quickly and forced an incomplete pass from C.J. Stroud. That was another guy who, he had, I don't think he was had a massive statistical day, but he made some really big plays, and it just felt like Ohio State put Cade Stover in a couple of kind of bad spots there, where. The play failed because they put him in a tough spot on the edge where if he doesn't make that block, Mayan Williams gets tackled for a loss.
Yeah, it did seem like there were a couple of times where you're watching and he's reaching and then having to kind of trace the steps, try to find that blocker, that the guy that he missed, and you miss him initially, then you have to go try to get him again, and by then it's too late. So then you're just picking up the ball carrier, and you're like, well, I guess we'll try it again. So. Yeah, he had a couple of those, and the drops in there, not his best game, but still was able to move the chains here and there. And I don't want to give away any bold prediction secrets, but I'm expecting a big day from Cade Stover against Indiana this week, because it is still, despite us falling back, it is still the year of the tight end. No matter standard time, daylight time, it's the year of the tight end still.
Well, if we're going to give away our bold predictions, I'm going to predict C.J. Stroud throws at least double the number of passing yards he did last week. 3 points. Who says no?
Is that the one you're giving me?
No, in fact, it is not.
To follow up with the offensive line, I thought they played better in the second half. There were some very rough moments, as we all saw in the first half. There was one where, Donovan Jackson just gets pushed into the backfield by a man with just one arm, basically just drives him back, and it may have been a stretch play, but in the second half, I thought they played better, but that creates a chicken or the egg type of situation for me, and that is it the rock finally cracking and being broken, or was the better play up front simply, or were they just playing better? So was it Northwestern wearing down, or was it the offensive line playing better? And unless you know which one of those it is, I think it can create a situation where you, the next time out, you're like, well, it'll crack just like it eventually did last time. It's like, well, actually, it wasn't that. You just started calling better plays, or, they are actually playing better. So, if you could avoid all of the bad plays and just go with the good plays and the good execution, you could have 4 quarters of running the ball and there'd be no rocks to crack. If you just do the stuff properly and do the good stuff instead of the bad stuff, you wouldn't have to continue to go rock. Hey, finally it broke. And it's like, why did it break? Did it break because Northwestern got tired, or did it break because you did something correct and you did something that fits the offense and it fits their personnel and it fits the scheme?
Well, I have a related one, and it's on the defensive side of the ball, and it was the same thing. At the start of the game, Ohio State looked completely unprepared for what Northwestern was throwing at them, and then they adjusted to it. and then they sort of contained Northwestern in the second quarter, and then in the third and fourth quarter, it was just Northwestern had no answers. It reminded me, it was very much like watching the Michigan-Rutgers game where, Rutgers had a certain amount of stuff. They were just going to pull a certain amount of nonsense out of their bag of tricks. And, we've got this, I don't know, flea flicker. We've got this whatever. And, okay, they had a reverse pass, I think, okay, we've got all this stuff and that's going to get us to 17 points at halftime. And then you come out after halftime and it's like you hold the bag upside down and nothing falls out. And it's like, uh-oh. And that was kind of what happened with Northwestern. It was like, okay, we've got this Wildcat and we're going to, it's going to work for a little while. And then when it stops working, we've tried nothing and we're all out of ideas, essentially. It's very similar. We talked on the Michigan Monday show about how Michigan has been so good after halftime. They've given up 6 points in the third quarter and 42 points in the fourth quarter. Ohio State has given up 13 points in the third quarter and 38 points in the fourth quarter this year. They have been pretty much as good as Michigan. And they looked like, the same way Michigan came out and looked dominant on defense, Ohio State came out and looked dominant on defense after halftime. That, it took like this weird improvised stuff for Northwestern get a first down. They weren't getting honest first downs, Tony. They weren't getting, the way it used to be. You used to get a first down by running off tackle 3 times and getting 3.4 yards per carry, and that's how a man gets a first down. And it was just kind of like, well, anything on short yard has got stuff. They throw it, and we've got an end around like Zach Harrison's right there and just eats it alive. It took the quarterback, having like 4 guys in his face, and he somehow reverses field and escapes, and everyone's just barely missing him. And then, he runs, or that one, I think he threw it and got it to a guy who got it by, like a half a yard. And then there was another one where he scrambled and he got it, and they had to measure it. And it was like by the nose of the football he got it. There was nothing easy for Northwestern in the second half. And again, you can kind of ask, is that to me feels more like Ohio State, that felt more like Ohio State had found the answers than just Ohio State wore them down, because I don't think they were, worn out from running the ball 25 times in the first half. That felt very much like Jim Knowles figured it out and went, okay, and then Northwestern had no answer.
Yeah, and looking at their second half drives, it's 20 yards, 36 yards. They had a 16-play, 60-yard drive that ended at Ohio State's 36 because that was the coffin corner punt. So, I mean, that would have had to have been like a 28-play drive to get into the end zone, basically. And then after that 60-yarder, they had a 7-yard, a 14-yard, and a 6-yard drive that ended the game. And it's, there's not much there. And outside of that 80-yarder, really, the second drive of the game, there's nothing there. And so I thought the Ohio State defense after that second drive did very well and did what they should have done. And you get bigger and you put 8 guys in the box. There are times where there's 9 guys in the box. It's like, well, clearly there's going to be no passing here. So you would have a couple of emergency tacklers in the back so that if something breaks free, you've got somebody there. And there are times where those guys were needed because something did almost break and those guys came in. It's a lot like the victory formation where you've got one guy way behind the quarterback in case there's a fumble, he can stop a defender from getting to the house. You basically had a couple of defenders back there just in case something breaks free, because as we talked about earlier in the week or after the game with maybe the Michigan Monday, I think Michigan Monday, where you got all of these guys at the line of scrimmage. If you just make one little hole at times, you can go the entire distance. And so they'd have some emergency defenders back there and still had enough guys to cover it up. Mine, Tom, let's go with this one. Tommy Eichenberg, when he lost his helmet, they just made a huge stop on 3rd and 1, and Northwestern's going to go for a 4th and 1. But on that 3rd and 1 play, he loses his helmet, so he has to come out. And I don't know if you watched it where they show him on the sideline. He's like distraught that he's not in there right now on 4th down, and he's putting the helmet over his face and just like, this is the worst thing that has ever happened to him. And you just felt like you could feel how much this was hurting him not to be out there. But then probably Teote is in there. He steps up. Taraja Mitchell actually came in for Tommy, but they had 4 linebackers in there, and probably Ian Aoteote was in there on the stop along with Teron Vincent, who continues to play very well. And Jim Knowles had some really great things to say about him on Tuesday. But just seeing Tommy Eichenberg's face on that one, and also EA stepping up there and making a play and just being the happiest guy you've ever seen jumping off the field. I was happy for him because he's a guy that's been here now for, I guess 2 seasons and has still been trying to find a role. I think he has a role now as this 4th linebacker, but also Jim Knowles said on Tuesday, don't be surprised if at some point you see Cody Simon and EA out there together as the 2 linebackers when they're trying to give Tommy and Steel Chambers a break.
Well, it does feel like they've maybe developed some trust in those guys in the depth at linebacker. And, as when I saw those guys out there, I thought, I wonder what Chip Trainum's thinking right now. Because Chip Trainum, much like Paulie Naoteote, transferred in. Naoteote kind of sat most of last year and has sat most of this year. Chip Trainum has sat most of this year. And, this would have been potentially the game where he gets on the field on defense. Instead, they move him over to offense because they're worried about the depth at running back. And then he gets 1 snap at running back and doesn't get a chance to play on defense. And I think I would have guessed he would have been ahead of at least one of those guys on the depth chart. So, you wonder what he was thinking watching all of this stuff. But yeah, you do have to feel good for Paula Naoteote, who, if you have more depth at that spot, that can only be a good thing. Because right now, I would have said before the game, they have 3 linebackers they really trust. And now maybe I think they have 4 linebackers they really trust. And, Tommy Eichenberg had to go sit out one play. It's possible that Tommy Eichenberg gets hurt, or Steel Chambers gets hurt, or Cody Simon gets hurt. I mean, these are things that can happen on a football field, and you have to have more depth there. You can't just sort of, have 2 guys and, well, I hope nothing goes wrong. That's not a viable option when you have Michigan on the schedule coming up, because I think you might see more than 2 linebackers on the field at times against Michigan. So, yeah, that seems like that's potentially something that could be really significant. And not that he's going to be playing 50 snaps or anything like that, but you might see him in, that's going to be short yardage, that's going to be goal line situations. It may not be 50 snaps, but if it's 4 snaps, it might be 4 really important snaps. So that's that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on moving forward. Let's see, my next one. It seemed to me, watching this again, it just seemed like Northwestern maybe had more of a plan for the conditions than Ohio State did, or at least executed that plan more early in the game. How about that? That's not quite English, but it's close enough. You understand what I'm trying to say. Ryan Day talked on Tuesday about going back and watching wind games, and there was some Patriots win game at some point, and a Bills win game at some point, and so he went back and watched that to try and see if they could figure anything out from how teams operated in crazy windy conditions. It just felt like it took Ohio State a little while longer to sort of reach the point of acceptance on the scales of the steps of grief, where it's like, I can't pass the football and that makes me sad, and then that makes me angry, and then eventually I get to acceptance and I just have to run the football and come up with different ways to move it down the field. Northwestern got to acceptance almost immediately. Felt like second drive, just boom, the Wildcat thing comes out, and it took Ohio State a little while longer to get there, I think. The first time I thought, Ohio State really had, the rock, paper, scissors advantage over Northwestern, where they had just sort of outsmarted them. The first time I looked at that and I thought there was like 4th and 1 with 3 minutes left in the first half. Ohio State's down 7-0. And CJ Stroud keeps it on 4th and 1. And it was just, everyone from Northwestern is sucking in, and then CJ Stroud just kind of waltzes off the right edge. And it was not a super long gain, but 10, 12 yards, something like that. But on 4th and 1, that was a huge play, and that was a drive where Mecca Ibuka scored, tied the score. And that really, going into the locker room tied 10-10 or 7-7 instead of down 7-0 is huge, because if you go down 7-0, Northwestern's feeling like, we got these guys. And going in 7-7, it's, okay, Northwestern just played an incredible half, and you're tied, and you've got to figure out Ohio State's talent wins out in the end. So that was a huge, huge touchdown for Ohio State there. And that was, I felt like the moment where things sort of changed, where it was like Northwestern kind of had it. They always had the answer for Ohio State, and then all of a sudden they didn't have the answer, and that kind of changed the whole game.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that Northwestern adapts quicker is I view it as if you're getting into a battle and Northwestern has a baseball bat and brass knuckles, and Ohio State has a baseball bat and brass knuckles, but also a bow and arrow and also blow darts and all these other things. Like Northwestern adapts quicker because they have fewer things to figure out that this doesn't work. And Ohio State has all of these other things and well, this doesn't work and this doesn't work. And then you finally figured out, okay, we've got to go with these because these things work. Northwestern didn't have that process of elimination. They just went with what they had. And I think that helped them initially because it's like, well, we don't have CJ Stroud and we don't have the receiver. So we're not going to try to see if this works. Ohio State, Ryan Day, I think felt obligated to see if this could work. And we've seen CJ Stroud throw in other conditions as well. And so I think they just, and we said this after the game, I don't think they thought it was going to be as bad as it was. And when Ryan Day was asked kind of that same question, you could see he's shaking his head before the question is even finished. Like, yeah, it was, you really can't prepare for it. It's worse than you would expect. And because you don't expect anything that bad, but that's certainly what they found themselves in, and then it did take them some time. I do wonder, as C.J. Stroud takes off on that fourth down, that if Pat Fitzgerald and the Northwestern defensive staff are like, well, crap. Because if they're doing that, then that changes things, and because we've never had to worry about this before, and so this is the wrinkle. And then you saw it later on in the game, and Ryan Day says, they'll have to use that more if the running game continues to struggle. So to go back to then my second or third point, is it cracking the rock? Is it calling better plays? Or is it the quarterback run that actually helped to open up things most with the running game?
Yeah, I mean, the quarterback run for sure changes. I mean, it just changes the math right there. That's the old Urban Meyer +1. If you have a +1 in the run game, well, that changes the numbers in your favor. And you wonder now, you've seen that, so does that open things up this weekend against Indiana, where Indiana goes, okay, well now we have to account for C.J. Stroud in the run game, and does C.J. Stroud just need to carry out fakes a little more than he has in the past, or does that help at all in terms of maybe opening things up inside? I don't know that I could see anything this week that would make me think it's fixed and everything is great, because Indiana is not good at football this year. But it does seem like that's something that I think we were assuming that may be something that was getting saved from Michigan. And okay, now the cat is out of the bag, but Michigan still has to account for it, and everyone else on the schedule has to account for it. So it's still going to serve its purpose whether he keeps the ball or not.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect to see it this week. May need to see it next week against Maryland, maybe. But certainly we'll see some more of it against Michigan. My fifth one is just something that looked funny on the screen. It was a 3rd and 14 for Ohio State against the wind. This may have been early on where they had the holding call, and then they pick up 6 yards probably with Emeka Egbuka, and then they've got 3rd and 14. And Northwestern's defense drops back like Ohio State is going to throw a Hail Mary, because there's no reason not to. Basically, they had 3 defensive linemen, and then they had 4 guys behind that, like 8 yards deep, and then they had 4 guys behind that, 16 yards deep. It was just 3 lines of defense. They were all barely in the same picture together. And obviously, Ohio State didn't pick it up. There wasn't really anywhere to throw because of that coverage, but I just thought it was interesting, like, don't worry about the pass rush. Let's just make sure we've got everything covered, because there's no way that you can get the ball through all of this quick enough that somebody isn't going to be there. And they were correct. It was just odd to see it. So if you go back and check it out, it's like I don't know, it's like you're setting up musical notes, like the scale thing. It's like you've got 3 lines there. You need a couple more lines, I guess, in there. You throw some notes. Just odd looking defense there that worked.
Yeah, and it didn't take much for a defense to work in the first half, or really in the second half. It was kind of like, yeah, you want to try some crazy stuff? I mean, sure, why not? The weather took away about 2/3 of what you'd want to do, so you didn't have to be too creative on defense to hold the opponent down to little or nothing. My last one, or next one, I don't remember what now. I think you did 2 in a row at one point, but that's okay. My next one / last one, we talked a bunch on the postgame show about Marvin Harrison Jr. and how, he was the one effective thing in the passing game, and they targeted him 8 times, and he caught 5 of them, and was by far, it was the why don't they do more with him, because if you're throwing the ball to him 12 times, you would expect him to catch like 8 or 9 of them. And I don't think I've had a game where I thought they're throwing the ball to Marvin Harrison too much. Like they're trying to force the ball into Marvin Harrison. Like even if you're trying to force it in, odds are he's going to make the play anyway. So it feels like you should throw him the ball more. But separate from that, he had a really big impact on this game in a couple different areas. One of the incompletions probably should have been a hold or a pass interference. I thought I saw that live, and it was, I'm looking through a camera lens. I'm like, well, maybe not. I'm like, no, there was definite contact, definite holding there. They probably should have gotten a call there on the one. And then on that long CJ Stroud run at the end, I saw Cade Stover have a great block on the edge, but Marvin Harrison had blocks on 2 different guys downfield. He kind of blocked one guy, got him away, then went ahead and tried to block the guy ahead of him, and then the first guy kind of caught back up and ended up making the tackle. But it was like a Terry McLaurin downfield 2 for special. It was a really, really impressive blocking from Marvin Harrison. It's just the guy just does everything so well. It's so impressive.
Yeah, on that incompletion, I don't know if the throw was made after the contact or not, so I don't know that it's a hold. Probably could have been if it wasn't, and if it's not a pass interference, because I think I wrote this in the Buckeye Watch. Everything that's thrown downfield is automatically uncatchable. So there's going to be no pass interference. Doesn't matter what's happening, because it's just like, no, there's no chance of catching that. And that was the case with that one for sure. Yes, Tom, I have run through all of mine. I have some other minor things. Do you have any other major things that you have not gotten to, or was that your last one?
The couple other things that I had on my list here were Mayan Williams on jet motion was kind of interesting, where you go empty, and then you run Mayan Williams in motion and hand it to him like on that jet action. I thought that was interesting. I don't think we've seen that before this year. And
one other time, I believe.
Okay, one other time. Okay, yeah, he's someone who it feels like he's much more of a north-south runner, so I don't know if that's a great, long-term thing, but that was kind of an interesting look, and it worked in that case. So, in that case, it's a brilliant call, Tony. That's how this works. The other thing that I had was, this is another one where I didn't get the camera over there fast enough to see the intermediate step of this play, but it was quarterback drops back, and then JT Tuimoloau has the ball in his hand, is like slapping the ball in his hand, and I'm like, what the heck happened? Well, he got up again and almost, this could have been another pick six. This was on, I think, Northwestern's first drive of the game. Just got around the right tackle, got his hands up, and knocked the ball down, but it wasn't that far from another pick six from JT Tuimoloau. That is just, with as much as a team like Michigan throws to running backs and throws little swing passes and throws little bubble screens to wide receivers or whatever, he's gonna be in a passing lane at some point, it feels like, in that game, and potentially make a big play.
You saw afterwards, he gave the Maxwell Smart, like, missed it by that much. You saw him on camera, and then he's like looking at his hands, like, why have you forsaken me? But he was human in that one, barely. And, yeah, that would have been a huge play, obviously. And it's like, well, that's just what he does. He's leading the Big Ten in interceptions and sacks and everything else. A couple of mine. So I went and checked the Jesse Mirko punt, the 77-yarder. It traveled from like toe to stoppage about 108 yards. So, and that was with somebody maybe stopping it, or you've got the little hill there. Like,
there's a hill behind both of the end zones there. So yes, he was working against gravity there at the end.
Could have gone 120 yards if they would have let it go. So that was very impressive. I also thought ABC did a good job on the broadcast of showing the wind at a time of possession, and how like Northwestern was trying to use every last second when they were against the wind, and just trying to like take the impact out of it. And the coach, and they showed how seriously the coaches were taking it. I had somebody on on our message board, Buckeye Huddle message board, was saying that Steel Chambers didn't play well. So I was watching him. I didn't see that. There was he wasn't perfect. There's one play where maybe he missed a gap, but you don't know because there are like extra gaps when you have these extra tight ends. But I thought overall he had a tackle for loss. He had another tackle for loss that was taken away by a penalty, but I didn't see anything really glaring there. And then the last thing was the sideline report that CJ Stroud Luke Whippler was telling CJ Stroud, like, I can't hear you. And it wasn't because of the crowd, it was because of the wind. This, which also gives you an idea that that it wasn't just blowing, it was loud, it was rain, it was really again, the story of the game, basically.
Yeah, it's just one of those things where I was talking to some people on Monday night who were just asking about the game, and was it as bad as it looked like on TV? And it was like, I had not rewatched the game at that point, but it was like, allow me to assure you, it was definitely worse than whatever you saw on TV. It was just crazy. And I shared this on the post-game show, but there was a point where I was standing there, and the wind literally blew me forward, like it knocked me off balance as I'm just standing there in the end zone with a little bit of a hill behind me to sort of break the wind a little bit. And there was a point in the game where it looked like one of the offensive linemen may have gotten kind of blown out of his stance a little bit by one of the gusts. It's like, yeah, I could absolutely see that. That is, I'm frankly surprised it didn't happen more. It was a really, really, even by weird college football weather games, which you're going to see a few times a year, that was a weird version of the weird college football weather game. So hopefully we don't have any more of those, because I prefer the 50 degrees and sunny and 5-mile-an-hour winds. Like I would take one of those this Saturday. I think we're getting one of those this Saturday for Indiana. So sign me up.
I had forgotten all of the different things that I saw with the wind as I was editing the Buckeye Watch. At one point, one of the signs off to the side, like the advertisements that were on the wall, came off the wall and hit a photographer in the back of the head, like blew and knocked somebody down. And I guess we all laughed, Tom. I laughed as well, just as you did.
It's funny because it wasn't me.
Less funny. But, stuff like that, stuff like the hat blowing off of a ref and him chasing it for 10 yards before, like, the back judge or somebody has it. He's like, no, I've got it. I blew right to him. I just, at one point, and within the span of like 10 seconds, the ball blows away from Luke Whippler as he's getting ready to snap it. And then as the play is going on, the first down marker blows away. And it's just stuff you've never seen before just happening right in front of you. Although Jim Knowles did say he'd played in one other game, coached in one other game like this, and that was when he was at Duke, and it was against Boston College, and basically in some sort of hurricane there on the coast.
The funny thing is, he was telling that story. It was a 2015 Duke Boston College game. Knowles was coaching for Duke. This was not a Ryan Day Boston College team. This was, I guess, after Day had left. And Duke kicked 3 field goals to take a 9-0 lead, and then gave up a long touchdown for Boston College with like a minute left or something to make it 9-7. But I think he has built that game up in his head a little bit, because there was no real mention of the wind the weather in the recap that I read about the game, and someone kicked a 53-yarder into the wind in that game. Tony, let me assure you, no one was kicking a 43-yarder into the wind on Saturday. So I don't know. I did not see any like specific wind measurements for that 2015 Boston College Duke game, but I can assure you the gusts did not reach 80 miles an hour.
Well, and I want to know, at what point would they have even attempted a field goal in this game? Like, how you have to be inside the 10 with the wind?
Well, I mean, if the wind is blowing straight, you could, and you have the wind at your back, sure, try it from 70, I don't care. But yeah, as soon as it starts going from an angle, that makes it impossible. Someone at one point said, I had not heard this. Had you heard anything about, they were talking about canceling the game? Someone said that at one point.
No.
That was the face I made too, that someone had said that there was some conversation about canceling the game, and I don't know if that was anything official or not, but yeah, I heard that on Monday night, and I thought, that doesn't sound familiar. It wasn't anything I heard as even discussed as a possibility. But
are you sure that wasn't Jim Harbaugh?
Oh boy, it's going to be a fun 2.5 weeks. Can't wait.
I can't wait. Anything else, Tom?
The only other thing that I had was first drive. There was a play where Julian Fleming got the ball knocked away. And, I talked earlier about, hey, you should get the ball to Marvin Harrison more. Marvin Harrison was split so wide on one play to the wide side of the field, it was like there was no chance they were going to make the throw to him. So then he's, a complete non-factor. They don't even need to double cover him. I think they figured that out relatively quickly, but, splitting Marvin Harrison out wide on a day where you can't throw the ball outside of the hashes, basically, was like, that seems kind of like a waste.
Yeah, you could throw a defensive tackle out on him, and it's like, well, got you covered. All right, that will do it then for this episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast with our Northwestern rewatch. It was interesting to watch on television. Good to see the different angles and get a closer look at all of that because it moves so fast when you're there. And certainly, Tom, trying to take pictures, you don't even get to see half of the stuff that is happening at times. But I want to invite you all to join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Please look into becoming a member and see if that suits you and try it out. Also, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle, where we are dropping stuff like this, dropping live streams. We'll be going live Tuesday night during the reveal of week 2 of the college football playoff rankings. And then we'll do that show, and then I will run off to do the teleconference and then come back and tell you all of the lies that Buke, Oregon, and the committee give us, and we always have fun talking about that. So that will do it for this show. I want to thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to you guys later.